What are you dancing? You're mute, huh? Don't start talking without on off. Yeah.
Good evening, Sham. Welcome to Malaysia.
Good evening, Malar. And I've been here since Monday, so not so welcome. And especially when we saw each other this morning and had a session that we facilitated together, the whole of this morning. Yeah.
No,
But
I can tell you I'm feeling less stressed because today when I heard the music, I heard the birds.
uh,
Finally heard the birds. Yeah. So
there you go.
now that you've told everybody you are in Malaysia and that I shouldn't say welcome to you in the way I said, thank you for being in Malaysia. How are you today?
I'm a bit tired. Just a lot of things going on this week. It's one of those trips. There's a lot of things going on. It's all packed. It's energetic, keeps your energy going, but at the same time, it's also energy sapping. Usually for me, the highlight of the week is our show. Everything kind of like moves towards the show, right? And then you get the show off and run the show, finish it, and then you go, but tomorrow I cannot do. Tomorrow is another day. Like it's up and ready.
And we are
Yeah.
together again.
Yeah.
for that,
Yes.
for that I'm grateful. So, welcoming everybody. Well, I must say that I'm just getting into the groove because I wasn't so active last month. So I must say I'm a little bit anxious taking on summaries from our dearest Ashok and Sham. And we thought, we were thinking about summary this week, for the month of February, Think Different. And we had three very unique speakers. Rajesh, who spoke about think different, have fun, and play hard, and his passion came through. And it's very nice to hear Raj talk about his passion and how he persisted with his passion. Because there is this very often, when we talk to our friends in the corporate world, right? Especially if you're in a job where you don't have an opportunity to express your passion. We tend to think, okay, let's take the practical way out. And I think for me, Raj displayed was, you can, once you decide that you want to pursue your passion, if you're willing to give it a go, you need to figure out how to do it. And for me, he actually, is very resilient, right? And then we had Thomas. Even though we were talking about love language of business, right? And it seems like, he has got this Zen energy where he's gentle, soft, navigating quietly through all his challenges. You see what we call quiet strength, which is again yet resilience, right? Because he doesn't take no, he's forward thinking and he's always trying to figure out how do I get into your mind, your space, make you feel empathize so that I can now understand how to influence you again for business purposes. Now, it takes a lot of grit, I would say, right? Delayed gratification, learning,
Yep.
observing, thinking through, finding the right moment. Again, another example of resilience is what Thomas showed. Then, of course, last week we had Jessica.
Yep.
Jessica straightforwardly spoke about adaptability, right? And we all know that adaptability is probably one of the top most skills that's required now. Why? Simply because nothing seems permanent anymore.
Mm,
Uncertainty is the only certainty. When I first got into the training industry, that's what we were taught, uncertainty is the new certainty. But the pace of uncertainty has
yes,
increased so much, which is
correct.
why if we look at future skills, if we look
Mm,
at how to stay relevant, right? What are
mhm,
some skills that's coming up? One is learning how to learn. Can I learn fast enough? Because I
mm,
need to learn and change fast enough. Another skill which is similar that's coming up is growth is very important
mm,
because what we have learned in the past becomes obsolete almost immediately.
correct.
Two very, very connected. And
Mm,
change is happening so fast, just like COVID. We don't know what else is awaiting us. But what we do know is that when
mm,
something hits, for us to be relevant, we need to always be at the age and learn how to be comfortable with change. In
mm.
all of this is actually skills of resilience, which is what I think we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. Um, I've got a few. I mean, similar in terms of takes that you have given, right, for the three guests that we had this month. Um, I think what for me it's common amongst the three. It's around language and communication and speaking up. Right. I was at a panel discussion last week in Singapore, and we had three speakers or three panelists, right? And one of the panelists was a former CEO of McDonald's in Malaysia, sorry, Singapore and China. And the first thing he said is that one of the skills that we need to have, and we need to, in order to grow and be constantly growing in business, is to be in work, in life, is our ability to speak up, right?
Mm,
And that's going to give us an edge over others, right? So one of the things that will plant us as talents, right, to be considered, is our ability to speak up. And so communicating, speaking up, language, I thought that was a common thread for me around with the three guests. So let me start with Raj. Raj was always speaking up. I mean, he was speaking up about football all the time. Nobody could miss the fact that he loves football. I mean, he's passionate about football, right? So much so that when a client came to them when he was in the agency, they automatically looked at him and said, "Nah, take it." And that led to where he was, or where he is right now, right? Led to the development and the starting of the Cage, and what Cage is 18 years on, yeah, the business that he started off, which is all about football, right? Thomas, it's about language and communicating, right? It's about um, what we say in NLP, pace and then lead, right? And it is about stepping into the world of your stakeholder, and understanding their world, understanding what, and listening and understanding what it is that is their challenge, and then say, okay, now how do I marry my field and make you understand my field, right? And see, this is how we can help each other, and we can partner each other and work together within the business, right? And Jessica's communication tool was, for me, the yes and, right? The yes, and what do we build on that? And it's a very interesting way in which to deal with adversity, right? Our natural instinct is to fight it, fly, okay, freeze, or we go and flock with the people who have same opinions as us, right? But it seems like, okay, wait a minute, yeah, it's not the best of the world, and what can we do about that, right? Well, I look at it from a communication perspective. I agree with you, and I am with you. It is about resilience, right? It's how we either communicate to ourselves. How do we communicate with others? How do we tell others this is what we're looking at, and why we want to build that resilience? We want to bridge adversity to perhaps resilience, right? Or opportunity to resilience. One way of looking at it. That's my take.
Nice, nice. And I think that's what the summary is all about, because it is really about what are some insights that we can gain from the leaders who've come through our leadership in Asia,
Yeah,
been
yeah,
for Asia this month. How do we connect the dots? What are some common themes, right?
yeah.
And how do we connect it back to our life? What insights can we draw? And what are some differentiators among them? And again, what can we draw from that? And if you're listening in or watching this, I see some of you are watching on LinkedIn. Say hello to us, join us in this conversation. It will be more exciting to have more people having conversation, right?
Conversations, yeah. And as you can see, we're not looking at conversation only to be the one who agree with us, disagree with us, right? And ask us what it is, because we all take away different things from each of our guests. Like, as you can see, Malar took a certain angle to it. I had a different angle. May have had, or you may have different angle, and share that with us. What was your takeaway? If you had joined us for any of those episodes, what was your takeaway from that? At the same time, it's always good to have a framework, if you will, or a conceptual handle in which we can have this discussion. So Malar has put something together which I thought was very, very neat for us to think of. How do we think about adversity and how do we think about resilience? And I'm going to, should we bring it up, Malar?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay, there we
So we
go.
thought we'll just share some thoughts around adversity. Well,
Mm,
it's a space that we work, we all work. You know, when we think about emotions usually we think about emotion as adverse emotions. When I'm happy, I don't say I'm emotional. When I'm angry, I say I'm emotional. So we're very
mm,
biased, right? Because emotion tend to be related to adversity, right?
mm.
I When I saw this, right, this particular quote has had a major impact on me. Funnily, because I didn't expect Albert Einstein to say this. He said,
Yeah.
"Adversity introduces a man to himself," and I'm sure he means the woman too, right? Now, why I like this is that I've always been a fan of adversity because we study it, we teach it, right?
Mm,
When we say adversity introduces a man to himself or a woman to herself, right? What I realize is that if you've ever experienced adversity, and I'm sure all of us have, when we are going through this difficult time, this challenging time, we're not sure how we're going to hack it.
mm,
But once we persist and we hack it, we get through that space, you're not the same person anymore, right? Number one. Number two, you I realize I uncover parts of me which I would have never known if it's not for the adversity, right?
mm,
Not that I'm looking forward to every adversity that's going to come my way, no. But because when I look at this quote and I look back, we all have adversity. And when we have issues and challenges and we feel adverse, that means don't know, we feel we are at the
mm,
corner, we
mm,
cannot resolve the issue at the same mindset, which is why we need a different mindset for us to be able to resolve it or get through it.
mm.
Right? And which is why resilience is often the result of adversity.
Adversity. Yep.
We talk about resilience as if is on its own, but resilience, you become resilient as
The
a result
result,
of
rather than an ingredient, right?
correct.
It's an effect of something happening, right? That gives you resilience. Yeah. I I I I really like this quote. It speaks to me as well, Malar, and for the same reasons that you talked about, because I found different nuances about myself
Mm.
because of adversity. All right. If it wasn't for that particular situation or instance, or yeah, I wouldn't have realized that I had potential in places that I didn't know I had potential in. And by the way, I think I'm actually not surprised that it comes from Albert Einstein. From what I know, read of him and watched documentaries about him, he was very reflective of human behavior. He reflected a lot on human behavior. So, genius, yes, he was. Yeah, he knew, he pondered and he studied humankind and how people thought about things. So I'm not at all surprised. Not at all.
Nice, nice. Yeah. So it's nice that we both love this quotation. So if resilience is the result of adversity, right?
Hmm.
Let's really look at some studies on resilience and adversity, right? I was introduced to this study because I'm a fan of positive psychology, and one of the fathers of positive psychology is Martin Seligman, right?
Martin Seligman. Hmm.
Yeah.
Um,
And the reason I was attracted to Martin Seligman in the first instant is he wrote a book called Learned Optimism. All right. And I've said this a couple of times, and I know people find it difficult to believe. I'm not too sure how many people I know are online. Oh, we're going to watch later. I say this. Um, when I did his optimism test, right, he has an
mm,
assessment, right, for me to do it, I came out pessimistic. And it was no surprise for me, right? It was no surprise for me because I know inside me I'm a pessimist. But because I smile a lot, even my pessimism looks positive, right? But over the years, of course, the way I come across has shifted so much. So if you've known me 20 years ago and now I'm a very different person. For people who know me will know me, right? But what
mm,
and that was the first point when I was reading his book. He was talking about how he was a pessimist, right? And it gave me a lot of hope of like, okay, now I understand myself better because he was emotional. But this study, so then I started going into the work of emotions, emotional intelligence, and resilience, right? But this study is a very interesting study, right? Because we often, whenever we talk to individuals or when we work in organization, there's a lot of judgment about people who seem weak, right?
see, weak, is it?
Weak,
Okay.
right? Not
Mm,
strong. We
mm,
celebrate strength
mm,
and, well, we criticize weakness, right? And how a lot of this study will actually, sometimes we don't take into consideration how people actually arrived where they have arrived, right? So this study is, they put this dog so you can see, there are two parts of the bars, right, where there's a shock and no shock. And so what they did is there were two sets of dogs, and what they did is, so this dog, of course, when it's trying to escape, if it gets shot, when it gets shot, when you get hurt, what do? You're pain driven, right?
you retreat. Yeah, yeah. You
You
retreat.
retreat.
Yeah.
So what this dog did is that it did not try escaping anymore,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Now, later, when there was no electricity, no shock, and they let it loose, what they found is that the dog was not
Still
willing
didn't.
to try anymore.
Mm,
This is
mm,
also the same story as the elephant with the chain around its
yep.
feet, right? Yeah, we call it
Yep.
conditioning. But what I
Yep.
really liked about this is that some of us have learned helplessness because
Mm,
of our past experience, past conditioning.
yep.
And I think what is important is for us to first look at our past. If we have learned helplessness, acknowledge it, embrace it, and know that it may not be relevant anymore today. For me, that gives me hope.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, some of the things that learn helplessness, it's conditioning. It's also what happened in, what happened and happens in concentration camps, right? When you want a certain behavior, you condition the behavior, right? I've got
Mm.
I have two questions, Malar. One is, you earlier on started off by saying uh, you're not rewarded by by having weak behavior, right? Or someone who's weak. How does that show up in an organization when a person is weak? Is it when the person cries, for example, or the person gets rattled very quickly, or the person says, doesn't speak up when the person has got something else to say? Is that what we mean by weak?
Well, I'm not too sure whether I will put it in those pockets, but I think one of the debates that always is happening is really about authenticity. Can I
Mm,
show up as I am,
mm,
right? And so when we talk about authentic, now, other times I feel vulnerable. Other times I feel like I can't do something.
mm,
Other times that I feel I'm going to tear, right? We all have been through that experience where we feel. So I want you to imagine you're in a meeting,
mm,
right? And one of your members feels emotional, and let's make it a she, and
mm,
she tears.
mm.
When someone cries in a meeting or at the workplace, how often do we conclude that she cried because she's weak?
Mm,
It's even worse if you're a male. It's
mm.
already tough enough for a woman. And you'd find that while March is going to be International Women's Day, right? You would
Yep.
find a lot of social media posts about women that encourages you to be strong. And we have a picture of strong, which means I don't cry, right? So what we're doing is we're associating crying to being weak
We. Yep.
and not crying
Mm,
to be strength.
mm,
And what happens then is that we can't show up as ourselves because we want to show up strong on the outside. When what we want to do is we want to cry. Why
mm.
can't crying be also strength?
Or neutral. If it's not a strength, why can't it be neutral? Right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And yeah,
So,
I can see how crying is could be seen as a strength if you're thinking about it from an emotional regulation perspective, right? That I am feeling something inside, I am frustrated, I'm angry, or whatever, and by just crying or maybe just tearing, it's a way for me to release that emotion so that I can move forward and do something about it, right? Could it
that's
possibly be
one.
seen as
That's
you
one.
know
But the other one is, I'm really reminded by Jacinta Ardern, right?
mm,
Think about her, right? She is in different spaces. She shows up as she really is. She's not afraid.
yes,
She's not afraid to show the world
yeah,
who she is.
she is, yeah. And yeah, and even more so, I mean, nothing emphasizes that more than the latest decision that she made, right, to step down.
Okay. Actually, coming up to that, I know, we're getting there, right?
Yeah.
We've got a couple of things to do, but that's a really good example. When she announced that she is going to resign because she's got
Mm,
no more gas in her tank, if I remember correctly,
mm,
we realized immediately the kind of there were two groups, right? One group criticized her.
mm,
This is not how leaders behave. This is not what we should do. You can
yep.
persist. You can do it. Dee da, dee da. But
Mm,
I think the fact that one is you know what you want, number two, you don't have what it takes at this moment because you've given your all. And for
mm,
you to be able to say that without feeling like any lesser as a person, I think that's amazing strength. I think that's amazing courage. But people miss
mm.
that out.
Means
It
that.
is only
True.
much later the empaths came, the emotionally intelligent people came. They came from a mental health perspective and they start saying, oh, what she did is actually self care.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we have this need to label stuff. In fact, one question that's been running in my mind is this: if we did a test for all the leaders who have burned out
Mm.
and they don't have enough gas in their tank,
Tank. How many of
and
them opened their mouth and said precisely what Jessica then did, right? Mm.
right,
Jacinta, sorry.
and
Mm.
that's really I think what it is, what it means to be resilience. So resilience is not coming out really, like James Bond, totally like, yeah.
Yeah. Untouched.
Untouched, so that's, I think that's the picture that's been built for us, but that's not how it actually happens.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So Daniel Craig just make it look really, really good, but that's a separate conversation. And here comes
Conversation
my
out
second.
here.
Here comes my second question, right? Um, how does learned helplessness happen at the workplace? So you mentioned that, it could have, how much of it, we have to go back to our past and ask ourselves how or what is it that we have learned at the workplace that or is contributing to learned helplessness, right? So what kinds of stuff would translate in that, or what would be examples that you
I
have
think first and foremost, I think a lot of learned helplessness comes from our upbringing, childhood.
Mhm.
Firstly, I
Okay.
think that's the
Mm.
base, right? Because I think if you didn't learn helplessness in your childhood, it's a lot more easier to appear hopeful when in your adulthood.
Mm.
Because, and you see that in some categories of young people who come into the workspace, and
Mm.
and they won't be helpless, they won't deal with the crap that some bosses put out
Mm.
to them, right? Okay, but how does learn helplessness look at work? So what actually shapes learn helplessness? So if you look at a workplace, right, I think this is something we've been getting, right? So I've been getting a lot of requests for feedback programs.
Mm. Correct.
So feedback and speak up. So very interestingly, organizations are like, okay, we need a feedback culture. Now, why do we need a feedback culture? Because we need to get to the bottom of what's really happening. We want people to
Mm.
speak the truth.
Yep.
Because the truth is where the strength of our business lies, right?
Mm. Mm.
And so teach us how to give and receive feedback. More than give, I think organizations are calling us to how to help people to receive
See
feedback.
feedback. Yep. Yes.
Now, why? The common experience is when I give negative feedback. Now, nobody tells us, oh, positive feedback, I have it has a
Issue.
negative feedback. Yeah. So which is why we're not talking about it, right?
No, I have an issue. If it's done in public, I have an issue. Yeah. So that's my recognition
Oh.
stuff. Yeah. 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 Sometimes.
So if it is a negative feedback or a constructive feedback, right? Why is it I'm having difficulty accepting it? Right?
Mm.
Because it's
Mm.
hurting me, it's hurting my self belief, it's hurting my self esteem.
Esteem. Yep. Correct.
Yeah. So, number one is again where it's coming from. I'm already
Mm.
feeling helpless. I'm feeling like a failure. I'm feeling I'm not good enough. Now, when someone now gives me a feedback and gives me evidence that I didn't do well in something, then my esteem drops.
Oh,
Now,
stop.
yeah. The other thing is this, right? We talk about culture. This is where we talk about psychological safety, right? Right? Do you feel that you can hope, you have hope in an organization, the feeling of you're respected, the feeling that you are an equal in the organization,
Mm.
immaterial of your position? And this is what Jessica introduced to us about I think the Google culture, right?
Yep.
Because how you get enough airtime makes you feel respected and like an equal. Because when
Mm.
you're given equal time, you have to speak up. And when you practice speaking up becomes normal. And when you speak,
When speaking up, the behavior of speaking up is acknowledged and recognized, then it becomes normal, right? And
mm,
it becomes safe.
Mm,
to do that, right? Yeah. So how do you give people access to speaking up? And what Google did
mm,
was they flattened the hierarchy so that you had, in a way, no choice. It was structurally done, systemically done, that we need to speak up, right? It drove the behavior, it designed the behavior that's needed, right? Speaking up. People need it. You need to say, you need to put your input in there, because one is you're visible, perhaps. Number two is, if you don't, yeah, so it just made it, I think, a lot more safer for people to say what they needed to say,
mm,
wanted
mm.
to say. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So in organizations, sometimes, when we're running training programs, they won't speak up when the bosses are there. They won't write certain things when the bosses are there. And for me,
Yeah.
it's like, I tease them, right? So when I ask a question and they go all quiet, that means they agree with me, right? Now, a lot of times, we don't empower people by telling them you can do it. Safe space is not when you tell them it is safe. Safe space is when they know by the past experience of what happened to other people
Mm,
when they spoke up, right?
mm,
They
mm,
have recorded negative experiences, then they're going to feel helpless because no one is going to save me,
mm.
right?
Got it.
And yeah, so it's really the cultural element of the past experience. Having said
Yep.
that, I have also experienced people who say, if we speak up in our organization, we'll get transferred, for example.
Mm.
Right? And now we call this a thinking trap. You panic for no good reason, right? And I usually ask them, in your direct personal experience, have you seen anyone
Anyone who then that
has
has been done too. Yeah.
one? And then they'll go like, actually, no. I said, okay, but let's look for someone who's an outlier who is actually
Mm,
outspoken. Do
mm,
you have any outspoken person who is recognized positively in the organization?
mm.
All right.
And
So sometimes, and there are usually always examples. Very seldom people say no, right? And I
mm,
find these two questions are really very good for them to pause for a moment and identify their own learned helplessness that may not be part of the culture, but it's
mm.
coming from somewhere else.
So that's
So
what
I
you
think
mean by your past uh
experience.
experience, right? Yeah. Okay. Very nice. Nicely done, Malur. Really. Shall we move on to the next
Yes,
slide?
we should.
Okay. There we
It
go.
is 6:30, huh? All right.
Haha.
So two things happen, right? Very quick one here. I think when an adversity strikes, when you're going through a difficult time, when you're challenged, right? Two things. We either feel helpless or we feel hopeful.
Hopeful. Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
how do we move from helplessness to hopefulness will determine whether we're going to be resilient or not.
Yep. Right.
Right? So I
So,
want you
yep.
to imagine if you're totally helpless, you're not going to do anything about it because it doesn't make a change. It
Yep.
won't make a difference. Right?
Hmm.
Mm.
So I wouldn't say helplessness is pessimism. I think helplessness is, in a way, you've given up, right? Because if you put these two words side by side and you've got optimism and pessimism, there's a tendency for, I think, for us to think, oh, so hopeful equals to optimism, helplessness equals to pessimism. I think why am I not being able to roll my tongue around it? Helplessness is not pessimism. To me, it sounds more like I've given up.
Pessimism can
Hmm.
lead to helplessness.
Yeah, anything in overuse can lead to, becomes dangerous, right? So an overuse of pessimism can lead to helplessness. That I agree. Yes.
Actually, more than overuse, what I understand from Seligman's work is,
Mm,
you see, when you are pessimistic, right? We say, me always everything. I'm the problem,
mm,
always the problem in everything. So what you're doing is you're not giving yourself any space for change or growth. All right.
Mm,
Whereas people who are optimistic will say, not me, not always, not everything. Even if you're successful once, you're going to take that credit, hold on to that hope for your
mm,
next change. I think that's the difference, number one. Number two is that what's interesting about Seligman's optimism studies, if you're a 10 over 10, 10 over 10 doesn't equal to success. It is usually about 8 over 10 that equals to
this is-
success.
mm,
Why? There is optimism laced with realism. So, realistic optimism is what we are seeking,
yes, yes.
right?
Yeah.
And what is realistic on the radar? On what do you call it? What do you call the
Mm,
line?
the spectrum.
On the
Spectrum.
spectrum, yeah, right, on the spectrum, and it could be different for every situation.
Mm,
But for every situation, you need to find the tiny little hope that is there and anchor it. It doesn't have
mm,
to be an 8. For some situation, it can be a 4. A 4 is always better than a 1,
mm,
right? But it is validated with evidence. It's not a make believe system. It is not this positive thinking or toxic positivity that we're talking about, right?
mm.
So that's what will move us from helplessness to hopelessness. And of course, when in our resilience flow, we talk about the 6 skills that leads us to
Yeah.
feeling resilient, feeling hope.
Mm, mm. And I like this. I like this slide. I think it really exemplifies what we're talking about, right? Or how to contextualize it, right? And how you put resilience on one side and adversity on the other side. It makes sense because it's like we said, resilience is the effect, it's the end product of going through adversity, right? And to me, those things on the bridge, I'm just going to say what those things mean to me. I think those are like tools and how we utilize the tools to get from adversity to resilience. How do you see the elements on the bridge, the red
Uh,
bridge?
exactly right. When you're facing an adversity, these are the 6 what we call competency. You need to know for your current adversity what
Mm,
are the tools or skills that you need to get to the other side. Because once you get through your difficult time or your adversity, you end up with the outcome which is being resilient. So we talk about this 6, which is optimism, perseverance, adaptability, which Jessica spoke about, self esteem, my belief in myself,
mm,
unbiased ability to stay objective, and assertiveness, taking a stand, protecting my rights, right? Now, if we connect this to the 3 speakers, maybe that's what we'll do, right?
yep,
Sham,
yep.
I think you loved the cage and Raj and football, right? Now, I'm sure you can see how he applied some of this when he started off his business out of passion.
Yeah, I think, and I don't think I know. It was very evident, so it was obvious from the way Raj speaks and what he did that his optimism is it's what we call realistic optimism, right? So what did he do? He did his research. So he didn't just go into the business because it's a passion. I love football for whatever the reasons, and he had a range of reasons for it. It's going to be a brilliant business idea. He did his research. He continues to do his research, right? And
Mhm.
that's, I think, what we mean by realistic optimism. He loved it. He was positive. He's positive enough to know that there's something there. There's a business idea there that's worth pursuing. At the same time, I'm going to balance it and I'm going to hedge my risk by looking at what are possible things that can trip me up, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
That's one. Self-esteem, he holds, he's very strong with his self-esteem in the way he talks about how he spoke about football. while he was in advertising, right? He talked about it so much. He was comfortable talking about it, right? He was comfortable going to the field, the padang somewhere, with his friends, pitching a goal post and, just playing football because he loved football. He loves football, right? At the same time, I think he is very adaptable because he looked at he looked at what makes a business successful in the early years. And he realized very soon that there were copycats, right? People copying their model of business, and said, okay, we need to adapt. We need to change. We need to change faster than the others in order to be always ahead of the curve, right? So while the core business is the same, what are the other things that we need to do to make us one step ahead of our competition, right? And for him, it was looking at what was the experience people have, what was value that we can give people, and becoming and being profitable without increasing prices, which is an interesting concept to hold, right? When things become expensive, what do most people do? They increase the price so that it is taken off and we still get the margins that we want, right? So he looked at how we can adapt our business to do it. And like you said, we created demand when the competition was free.
Mm, mm,
Right? You could play football anywhere.
mm,
Why do you want to pay to play football?
mm,
That was 17 years ago, and they're still very, very successful. So I
mm,
saw there's just lots of this. So these were the elements I think that stand out for me with Raj.
mm.
What do you see with Thomas, or with Raj,
No, actually, I was
Mother?
going to ask you about Raj because I know you are a fan of Raj, right? um, if you really look at the six skills, I think which of these superpowers do you think he used most for him to have
Hmm.
persevered in the business?
Um, I okay. Which one was the one that the first pedal, right? The first gear that he put in.
Mm, mm.
I think it's optimism.
Okay, I would have
For me,
guessed. Yeah, for
yeah.
me, when I listen to Raj, I think it is his esteem. He's very sure of himself,
Mm,
more than the
mm,
belief in the business. He's
mm,
very sure that he wants to work with what he's passionate about. So that belief without anything, like, I know that with who I am in my self belief, I can make anything happen, or I will make anything happen. I'll make this work. I'll just
mm,
need to figure it out, kind of an attitude is what I saw in Raj,
mm.
which then for me, all the other things. So I felt
Yeah,
that his foundation
yeah.
that I saw was his self-esteem, which is the same
Mm,
for Thomas. Maybe I'm just stuck with self-esteem, With Thomas,
mm,
yeah, because right, Thomas and Raj are two different personalities. Raj is a bit more
yes.
extroverted, seem
Yeah.
extroverted, and whereas Thomas is like this gentle, introverted, but so deep. And I'm not saying Raj is
Mm.
not deep, yeah. And
I was gonna ask you.
yeah, I'm not saying that, but
Yeah.
you don't usually, people who talk a lot like me, you never think they're deep. You don't usually say, oh, an extroverted person is
Stop,
deep.
stop, stop, stop fishing for compliments. Go.
Yeah,
Mm,
in public,
mm.
right? Now, but you see, there's a lot of criticism against extroverted people, right? But when you look and where people who are quieter, introverted, when we talk about quiet leaders, Thomas was that exact example of who is soft and gentle, and he's reflecting and he's really thinking, how do I navigate through this? How do I
Mm,
speak in a way that people will listen so that I can influence them?
mm.
His practice of delayed gratification, willing to wait for people to be ready. right? Now, and I think that's where Thomas is concerned, right? You see, self-esteem when nothing is happening, when you're not loud, when you're not the center of attention, it takes a lot of self-esteem for you to anchor, observe, reflect, and navigate and influence people. So I saw the
Mm.
same thing in Thomas.
In reflected in a different way, right? It
Yes,
comes
that's
out in a
right.
different way, and that's the beauty of it, because self-esteem is different in different people. How it's seen, how it's heard, it's different, isn't it? And sometimes we make the mistake of forgetting that and encoding it differently. Um, for me, with Thomas, what shines through is unbiased.
Mm,
Unbiased, right? So he is, to me, what do I mean by that? Um, in our field, in our domain, we are very passionate about it, right? We are in a way we could say we are very biased about it. So his domain is HR now, right? He comes with an education from engineering. Perhaps that led to him being unbiased. I'm not going to guess. So I will not guess. But what he has taken and what he goes to the different roles that he plays in different organizations is that I'm going to keep my HR part quiet for a while until I figure out this this partner that I'm working with, right? I need to put that partner center of my attention. I have to reduce my self orientation and focus on this person and see what is it that this person is struggling with, what is it this person's challenges are. And then I'm going to put on my HR hat and see how I can support this person, right? So it's not coming from this is my HR agenda and I need to now get that across. It's flipping it to the other way and saying, okay, this is my stakeholder. How can I support this stakeholder in making sure that this stakeholder succeeds and succeeds well? And what can I then do to, create that for the stakeholder? So for me, I think, the unbiased comes out quite loud.
yes, yes. I mean, he's very, very objective. But, I am biased towards self esteem. I would say that, you know, his unbiasedness was actually riding on his very, very strong self esteem. Because,
So
because
you're
when you
saying
have,
high self-esteem, therefore you can afford to be unbiased, right?
correct. I wouldn't
Because
use the word, for some reason, I don't like the word high self esteem. I like healthy self esteem in the flow state, right?
okay.
Now, only because when you talk about high self esteem, we have a picture of how high self esteem looks like, and
Let me
sometimes, yeah,
put this.
sometimes we are driven by, oh, I need high self esteem. I need to believe in myself. When we talk about in the flow
Mhm.
state, when we're talking about 8, 9, 10, the overuse of self esteem can be pretty damaging because we sometimes are unrealistic, and it can have a lot of potential
Okay. So you're seeing it in that way.
from
Okay.
that. Yeah,
Mm,
and I
mm.
also think it is okay for us not to be always on the healthy side, because in some situation our esteem suffers, and for us to recognize that we are not feeling healthy in our self belief is the space of growth where we
Yep.
can now,
Yep.
that's your adversity. So when I have my self esteem is struggling because
Mm.
I don't believe in myself. Now, as long as my belief, my low belief in myself is validated. So, for example, if someone tells me, to take on a particular project that I have no experience and the stakes are high, and I won't pump myself and say I believe in myself. No, I will say I'm actually worried because I'm
Mm.
struggling a little bit with my self belief, and that struggle is a healthy struggle. It is recognizing I don't have the muscles so that I build the muscles.
Mm.
And that
Mm.
space, recognize the recognition space is your adversity, right?
Correct.
And the
Correct.
building space is your
Your-
adaptability that Jessica introduced to us. With
Yeah.
her yes, I may
Mm.
not have the skills
Mm.
and I can learn it now,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah. So tell me, I know you want to tell something about Jessica.
No. Carry on, carry on. It's we've gone to Jessica, so let's go in that path. There's a natural way for us to come back to the point I had earlier on, then I'll come back to it. So
I'm
yeah, just
excited to read a comment. Finally, we have a
yes,
comment. It's like otherwise it's just the both of us. Gerald, thank you very much. Gerald
yes.
says, "Leadership in Flow Asia, excellent session. Only gets better." Thank you,
Yeah,
Gerald.
if I have a way of putting like a heart shape, I would put a heart shape right now. But there's nothing, the StreamYard doesn't have. Yeah, I don't
No,
know. Don't ask me to do those kinds of things. I don't know.
we
Is
can
that
do.
like that? Like yeah, I don't know. Don't
Yeah, thank
know.
you, Gerald, for always encouraging us. Right. So when we
Yeah.
talk about Jessica, when Jessica introduces to lab,
Mm,
right? Listen, accept, and build.
build.
Again,
Yeah.
so if you look at listen and accept, listen means listen and accept is in the space of adversity. I don't like it, but I need to listen. I need to accept because I don't like it.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
when we like something, we don't think about acceptance because it's there, right?
Mm,
Then
mm,
she talks about building on it, right? Now, why build on it? Now, how do I grow from this foundation? How do I grow from this space? How do I make this better for myself? So instead of yes, but, because when I use the word but, I'm saying no, I'm pushing, I'm having a pushback.
mm,
Yes, this is true, and
mm.
this is what I can do about it. So what she's doing is that she's always giving us options. So when we do yes and we're giving ourselves choices, we're giving ourselves new options to say that we can get through that.
My takeaway from Jessica's session.
Mm,
So it's adaptability, right? That's essentially the core of where her focus is. I wish we had gotten a little bit more into her story around why that resonates so much with her that she's chosen it as a direction and a path that she's following, right? The one thing that I took away from it, because she was going yes and right, and it's very easy to fall into the trap, like, so in any adversity and all adversities I need to go just yes um, and constantly look at realigning, rethinking, re-looking, or reframing this situation that I'm in. And she said, no, think about it as a 1% mindset,
mm,
right? So we're not always changing just because we hit a roadblock. Um, it's a 1% thing. So if at least 1% of the time we're looking at it, that's is significant enough for us to make we adapt in significant ways. It's significant enough, I think. And that goes back to your point of when I said high self-esteem rather than high, is your self-esteem enough, healthy
mm.
enough for you to do what you need to do and perform well, right? If it is, why then do you need to have it at a higher level? I think was what you were meaning, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Hmm. Hmm.
And which actually leads to the last two slides because we've got like 5 6 minutes, maybe
It's, yeah.
five to wrap this up. I think, we all talk about growth mindset and fixed mindset. So when we look at challenges, the challenges that Raj had or Thomas had and Jessica, right? In all their challenges, which is known now as an adversity, they decided I need to look beyond what I normally do, which is now
Yep.
known as growth mindset, right?
Mm.
They learn
Mhm.
new things, they embrace the challenges, they persist, right? Now,
Mhm.
I'm going to connect this. So we know growth is a very important skill for us to move into the future because you need to keep growing. You cannot not
Yep.
grow anymore if you want to be relevant.
Correct. Correct.
Now, excuse me. Now,
Mm. Sure.
I want to connect that to grit, Angela Duckworth's work, right?
Mm.
I love this, right? Now, why? Because she says grit. Sometimes you're wondering, old school of thought, right? My mother will say, you need to persist and persist until you literally die.
Yep.
But
You.
I think we want to be more realistic and say when to persist, when to let go.
Mm.
Right? And Angela Duckworth talks about greed equals to passion plus perseverance. So, what is perseverance? It, perseverance is what typically we'll call resilience.
Yep. Yep.
I'm going to take a break.
Yep, you're going to take a break. While Muller takes a sip of water to gather her throat into alignment again, if you have questions, and it's nice to have conversations with other than the two of us. Um, so, yeah, what would your take be in terms of Angela Duckworth's definition of good, right?
Yeah, thanks, Sham. Now, while we are waiting in the next 4 minutes, now,
Yeah.
Angela Duckworth very clearly states, right? Perseverance means when you persevere, that means you're willing to continue the journey,
Mm,
however difficult it is. That means you're not willing to give up. But
mm,
it has to come with passion. What is passion? Passion is purpose driven, like Raj.
mm,
Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why did Thomas do what he did in terms of learning the love language of the business?
mm,
Why did Jessica persist in being adaptable by, propagating the idea of yes and or lab? Now,
mm,
why? Because she's very passionate about people having choices, having to be adaptable. So, if you look at all three of them, Raj with football, Thomas with his love language, and
mm,
Jessica with her adaptability quotient, all of them allow their passion for a purpose to give them direction in the way they are leading. And in those areas, they persevere. Persevere
mm,
means they take daily actions that add to the purpose. So every day I'm doing something that will add to my purpose. And that's
mm.
what Angela Duckworth calls grit.
Great.
So
Mm,
I think it is not just about persevering for the sake of persevering. No, to know your why I'm doing
yep,
it,
yep.
because that's the direction. And all of these three speakers were very clear about the direction, even though they didn't talk about it. Which is why I think leadership in Asia for the month of February, our theme was think different.
Mm,
Every one of these leaders, or every one of the leaders actually think differently. And when they're
yes.
driven by passion, i.e., purpose, they
Mm,
let that give the direction to where they're going to put their daily energy in terms of what are my daily action that I want to persevere, because that daily action that I persevere will then turn into the results, which then will be resilience for us.
I love the equation that you have here for perseverance, right? Because, and let me tell you why, because sometimes perseverance is used as a replacement to hunker down and do it, like all hands on deck, let's do it, and we have to do it. I think that they are different, right?
Mhm.
Uh, Perseverance is a superpower when you have precisely those two elements in it, right? Daily, there's practice in doing what you're doing. There's hope in the face of adversity. So there is adversity, but there's hope that there is something I can do to change it, to make it different, okay, or to make it better, right? I think when you say hunker down, there might not be that hope. And so therefore it cannot be seen as perseverance. It's we are pushing through, we are going through. I don't think that defines perseverance, because sometimes we are hunkering down and doing it because we're told to do it, Yeah, we are hunkering down and doing it because we have no choice. The no choice doesn't mean there's hope. Um, so when I saw this, that's the first thing that came to mind, because sometimes I hear people use perseverance and hunkering down as, synonymous. It's the same thing, but there are nuances in it that make it different, and I think this helps us see that difference.
Nice one. And as we end, right, there's just one question for those who are either listening in, watching now, or watching this episode later as we summarize for the month of February, right? If you think
Mm.
about it, right, if people who are in leadership position, if there were no adversities, if things were business as usual, will leaders have a role? Number one. Okay.
Mm.
And if leaders who have a role, especially in leading people toward, when things are difficult, giving them a sense of direction, if they don't think differently, would they be adding value? I'm signing off. This
Nice.
is Mala from Hearts and Minds. Till we meet you next week.
And I'm signing off as well, because I don't want to spoil a good thing, and especially a good close like that. And we will come back again next week, same time, same place, different month, March, and a different theme with a lineup of 4 guests, because next month we have 5 Thursdays, right? So we'll be having 4 guests. We have lined them up, but join us. We're not telling you what the theme is yet, because we want that as a surprise, and we want you to also think about that. So let's think different for
The month of
resilience.
February. And if you want to be reminded, remember to subscribe to our channels. With that, bye.